Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. I'm Sarah Vantine here with Ted Ings and John Traver, Chief Executive Officer of Traver Connect. Ted, it's always a pleasure to have John on the roundtable with us.
It is, and the fact that you and John and I can all be together here at this time of year and at such an important time in our industry. John Traver, welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Ted and Sarah, thanks for having us back. Great to see you both.
John, you've got a lot on the go. We had a chance to meet some of the team at Traver Connect at the pop-up that just happened at Northwood University. Thank you for your support of that, and an exciting time in our industry for Traver Connect.
It is. It is. The business continues to find its place in helping dealers make experience matter, and this time of the year is no different for us. Thanks again for what you do at the Fort with Fixed Ops Roundtable, a forum where we can come together around fixed ops, around the consumer who's not in our meetings here, but who we gather for. So exciting times for real.
And John, here we are now squarely in the fourth quarter. Tailgate touchdown. I'm looking forward to what you have to share today. So I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away.
Well, you really put the ball on the tee for us this time because football season, check. And, you kind of opened a door for me this time, Ted. I got to say, first of all, the crew that, stands on the fort for us and leads the way, incredible crew. And each of you I know personally as well as professionally. And I value each of you deeply. Today, I'd like to pick our defensive coordinator out for a second and just celebrate this guy a little bit. Sean Kingery, Ted, sometimes when you get to know people, some of them bleed a different color. You know what I mean? And I got to say, in no deference to you or Sarah or Ed or Tully, this guy bleeds a special color. He bleeds cheese, brother. This guy is from my home state, Wisconsin. and I mean, it just doesn't. Sean, this is your moment. I'm teeing you up, buddy. So represent us, okay, in those meetings with the Fort. And by the way, a recent photo of none other than my Green Bay Packers snagging a catch in the end zone over the Chicago Bears. God bless the Bears. All right. So with that
John, Sean is, as you know, is a diehard Green Bay Packer fan. I mean, wow,
Yes, I know. We may or may not have spoken about it once or twice. So I just thought I'd put a little grease on metal for Sean and give him a little bit of wind in his sails, if you will. So let's start with the football theme and see if we can't tie this into fixed ops today. Football, I would say, has at least three parts, and I'm going to pick these three to talk about. I think, Ted, one part is obviously the great athletes making the great plays on the gridiron. That's certainly a component of football that gets us all excited. I think another part is what happens maybe before, during, and after the game. It's the camaraderie, very much like the Fort here. We do stuff like you've done with the pop-ups. In this case, it's tailgating. And there are some organizations and teams where it's a culture. Green Bay, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, the Texans, and more for sure. So the tailgating. And then finally, Ted, there's the stats, It's the yards, it's the interceptions, it's the big plays, and everything is measured very much, Ted, like in fixed ops. Everything is measurable. Now, what's fascinating to me is football is also fantasy. And I'm not sure that correlates a whole great deal with fixed ops, but in fantasy football, per Statista, it's an $11 billion industry today.
Wow,
and
wow.
It has over 50 million players in the US, and it all spins off of engaging people in the sport. So fantastic. It crosses over all kinds of lines. So with that being said, I think if you know a little bit about football, there's a story going on inside of football, very much like fixed ops, that's unique, Ted. There's always these two tensions, two themes that you can draw out of football. That first picture I showed you was the play that maybe changed that game. Maybe not. And that's the first thing I would tell you, is that in football, there's a play, sometimes it changes the entire outcome of the game. Could be the last play of the game. Could be a play at the end of the half. It could just be a play that kills a drive, but there's a play that changes the game. Ted, I would say that probably is true in fixed ops. The
Hey, John,
second thing is,
John, can I bring this back to the Packers for a moment?
come
Uh,
on, well, I hope you will.
the great coach Vince Lombardi said that every game comes down to just a couple of plays, no more than 5, that will decide the game. And we don't know when or where they're going to happen. So we have to go all out, John, right on every single play.
Ted, I'm looking for my helmet right now. If you keep preaching like this, I'm ready to rumble. I got to tell you something. You nailed it. It really often comes down to just that couple few plays. But Ted, I said there's really 2 tensions. And if you watch enough football, you'll hear this theme throughout football, or you'll see it. And that is plays, and I want to emphasize the next 3 words, set the tone of the game.
Oh.
You see, there are teams, Vince Lombardi, using your take, he also said, he was there for 2 years. The first year was that they had been losing for over a decade. Vince Lombardi called his wife and said, honey, this year's different. We're going to win. They were a playoff team the first year. The second year, they made it to the NFC Championship game. They were leading in the fourth quarter. They lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. Everyone was dismayed because they felt like they should have won the game. The next year in training camp, the famous Lombardi holds the football and he says, do you remember, Ted? Gentlemen, this, go ahead, Ted, is a football. So as to say, we're going to start with the basics. And it was always about setting the tone with the run game for them. Well, in fixed ops, I would say there are also some out there who consistently perform because they're good at that. So the question is, well, let me just highlight these 2 for a second. You mentioned Joe Clemente earlier. Joe, we are so thankful to have Joe on our team here at Traver Connect. Joe is our executive vice president. Mm-hmm. And speaking of football, Joe he's a Washington Commanders. He's a fanatic, Ted. He's a fanatic. He's got some stories that'll blow your hair back. And then, we have another Joe. Both these guys visited you at Northwood recently.
Yes.
At your pop-up event. Joe's our national director of business development. And Joe also has a team. Joe is he's a Chicago Bear fan.
Is he really? Wow.
Yeah, Ted, if I break out in hives right now, will you let me know? Anyways. So what was really interesting, Ted, is about a month ago, these 2 guys, their teams faced off. I said the play that changed the game. Well, that game went back and forth. And I know Joe Link right now is going to roll over and curl up and probably start sobbing. But there was a Hail Mary pass that went over 65 yards in the air. It ricocheted off some Chicago Bears and landed in the hands of a wide receiver waiting for the ball in the end zone to win the game for Joe Clemente's Washington Commanders. Ted, that was the play that changed the game. Now, the question, plays that set the tone. If you ever watch the coaches walk the sideline, you'll see them with these laminated sheets, and they're categorized: run game, pass game, 3rd down, 4th down, red zone. And these are the plays that they have installed and practiced during the week that they feel game situation wise will work. In fact, the great coaches, going back to the 49ers in the 80s,
yes,
the first 20 plays were always scripted, right? For Bill Walsh and those great minds. And then eventually Mike Holmgren would continue that in Green Bay, so on and so on. So these are plays that are setting the tone of the game. And you're not trying to win the game with the first play of the game. You're setting the tone. So in fixed ops, Ted, the play that changed the game. I thought about this as I prepared this message for our group, because each time I want to spend time on how do we tie this message in? What's timely now? What do we need to be thinking about as a community in fixed ops in the U.S. here? And the play I think that changed the game, one of them, I would say, is mobile service, Ted. None other than our own Ed Roberts helping lead that charge, helping be bold enough to take risks, invest, and grow a fleet out, 50 plus vans. Who knows how many are even there now? I know it's more than 50. Wow. But Ed said, you know what? You can only build bricks and sticks in the back of the shop so quick. You got a convenience issue. Some customers can't get here. Why don't we make the stall mobile, put 4 wheels on it, take 2 folks, send them to the location. We'll do the service there. And so I think that play, Ted, is shifting the balance of the haves and have-nots. I think that is one of the plays of the game in fixed ops we should look at and consider. Now, Am I telling you that the way to win in fixed ops is only with the play of the game? I'm not, but I want to make sure that you sort out the right stuff. I think this is one of them. Another one, I would say, Ted, it has to be EV. And obviously, you know, when Elon Musk drove the patents for EV, he could have locked those suckers down for 20 years legally.
Well,
And for those that don't know, it's open source.
is it?
I mean, yes, it is. He truly wanted to incentivize the industry to come around EV. Now, whatever our take is on EV, again, all I'm saying is these are two major plays that have happened and are happening that affect fixed ops. Would you agree with that in general?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Absolutely. So two big plays that change the game. All right. So now let's go to the other half. So what route do I take? Right. So the audience might say, okay, John, so are you a play that changed the game guy, or are you plays that set the tone of the game? Well, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag and first say this. I'm both. And I think you should be too. I think you should be both. The play that changed the game, Ted, in 1996, Sean Kingery and I were rooting on the Green Bay Packers.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate because I was sitting 20 rows up behind the Green Bay Packers at the Superdome as they embarked on the first Super Bowl win since, well, it had been a long time, the 60s.
Long time.
Yeah. Brett Favre was sitting in the hotel before that game. He tells a story how he's watching an old 49ers Super Bowl where Joe Montana checks down on the first drive against the Bengals, and he calls this particular route and play as an audible, and he throws a touchdown to take them up 7-0. In this particular game, they're driving against New England Patriots. The first play of the first drive of the game, he checks down to Andre Rison, who grabs it on the seam and takes it the distance for a touchdown. The famous picture of Brett Favre taking his helmet off when it was still legal and running across the field. Ted, I have goosebumps as I tell that story. That was one of those plays that changed the game for me in that game. But Ted, there were more. There was another play. My favorite Green Bay Packer of all time was Reggie White, the former Philadelphia Eagle as well. And Reggie took that game over at the end. It was still a 6-point game. And the Patriots were driving. 3 plays in a row, he had 2 sacks and 1 tackle for a loss, the 3 plays of that drive that ended their chances. Reggie White was dominant. And last but not least, he's still around today, Desmond Howard, the former Heisman winner. We signed him as a free agent that year. He had drafted by, I want to say it was Carolina as an expansion team. Sarah might be able to tell us. She might have been younger then. Yeah. And then he was with Washington, and then he was cut, and we signed him as a kick returner. He was the MVP of the game, the only special teams player to ever win the MVP of the game to this day, to my knowledge. And he had a punt return for a touchdown and a kick return that changed the game. Any one of those 3 guys, you could have called out those 3 plays, Ted, and said that changed the game. But you know what, Ted? I got to thinking. I said, well, how do I speak to the audience about football and plays that set the tone? And I thought, well, setting the tone really is about being consistently dominant over a great period of time. So I think the question in football I would ask is, let me go back to 1995. Since 1995, who are the winningest teams in NFL football? And Ted, you'll never believe this. In order to be winning that much over that amount of time, you got to set the tone. So I asked the big question, right? Teams with the most wins since 95. The top 4, Ted, guess who's in second place?
Yeah, the back.
Just 10 wins behind the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick and Tom Brady are Sean Kingery and John Traver's Green Bay Packers. Ted, have I thanked you for allowing me to speak today yet? I'm having a great time. This is great, Ted. And I hope it's educational too. Now, that being said,
I love it, John.
Now, that being said, the Green Bay Packers had to do something right to consistently win that many games.
Yes.
That's my point. I know I'm having a little bit of fun today at the expense of others. But what I'm saying is they drafted 3 quarterbacks in a row. So maybe the draft was important for them. All 3 were tremendous quarterbacks. They had to do some other things offensively, whatever. So now we want to take and translate football to fixed ops. So in order to do that, Peter Drucker, and I've said this to the group before here, but you want, when you look at stats, you want to pay attention to the bend in the trend. Always remember the rhyme, the bend in the trend. People look at trends, but look at the bend, and that'll tell you something. That'll cause you to ask questions.
Okay.
So in automotive, I want us to look back over the last 6 years, because there's some things going on. We're going to look at 2019 through 2024. I'm going to use NADA data book that rolls up data, financial statement data from all the dealerships, US, many of them, most of them, total US dealership count, RO counts. I'm going to look at some economics too, Ted.
Okay.
Okay. And then last but not least, I'm going to look at key personnel in our space.
Nice.
And with those 5 areas, I want to give a very, very clear direction of where there's an opportunity to grow in fixed ops and where there's an issue that we need to solve together. So I said dealership count first. Ted, the first thing I want to say is you and I both remember when this was 25,000 stores, 21,000 stores, 19,000 stores. But I often hear people quote declining dealer counts like in recent years. Ted, the facts are it's pretty level.
Sure.
It's 16,000 over 6 years. So again, there is no bend in that trend. Over the last 6 years, if you're a dealer and you're watching this show, you have about the same amount of retail dealership competitors as you did 6 years ago. Safe statement?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that's one. So 2, let's look at RO counts. Now, Ted, this is where we slow this show down a little
And
bit.
I know you've been tracking this. You've been talking about this for just a little bit.
Ted, this is show 26. You could go back to show 5, and I was citing this.
That's right.
For 4 years in a row, we were over 300 million ROs. 2015, 16, 17, 18. And I might be wrong on 15. It might have been 16, 17, 18, 19. Bottom line, 300 plus million ROs. We peaked at 317 in the US. COVID occurred in 2020. So I'll give the stat. Okay, yeah, I get it. We were kind of shut down, handcuffed there for a good part of the year. We rallied and still recovered at 265. But Ted, look what happened. There's 45 million repair orders missing. I have one question. Why?
Yeah.
Why? It's not sales. It's not like we went from, 15 million units to 5 million units new a year. Okay. That's not the reason. Something has happened. And I'm going to lean into this today. That's 14.5% down over 6 years. Okay. So what does that look like at a dealership? Ted, if you and I are owning these stores or our partners who are watching this, in 2019, they were writing 16,800 plus ROs average, right? This is average, all stores. Okay. Total stores, total ROs. There's your formula. But since then, they're in the 15s, Ted.
Yeah. Look at that.
So you go, well, how do I pencil that? Let me tell you. That's about 225 repair orders a month, Ted. And your average blended, your blended RO value today in 24 is $478. I'll get to that in a minute. So what is 225 times 478? It's $107,000 a month.
A lot of money.
200 ROs is costing you $1,250,000 a year.
Well,
we got to figure out where those repair orders are. Okay. So next, 16.6%. This is no different than teams studying game film, Ted.
That's right. Yeah.
The week before or the week after and learning what's going on. We got to slow down and understand what's happening to assess and pivot and make a difference. Labor rate. Now, labor rate, Ted, what's interesting is we've grown $1.25, $1.30, and so on. What I do want to call out, though, is the tighter wallet. It's the first time I've ever seen it not change, Ted.
Yes.
I can't remember a pair of years where it's the same number on the NADA report. I went back multiple times, like I must have transposed that. I looked and I'm like, nope. Okay. So what's happened is I think you have customers in the drive. They're going, hey, bro, that's it. That's all I got. And I think the stores know labor rate is being squeezed a little bit. I may be wrong, but I want to give something to think about there. Okay. I'm okay being wrong. I'm comfortable with that. I'm wrong every day, Ted. Now, RO, dollars per RO. So customer pay, here's the journey. Up. We went down a little bit though, 24 from 23. Here's your warranty pay, up, right? And then here's your blended average. I always do a blended average RO. Now remember, this
That's how you got to
Domestics,
478. Okay.
yeah, that's how I got to the 478. So domestics are different than imports, are different than luxury. I get it. Someone out there that has an entry level, you know, franchise, and they're going, that would be great. I'd take the lowest number. I get it. But there are luxury stores that are looking at the number going, wow, I'd get fired if I was at. Remember, this is blended. All I'm trying to do is get us to a normal number here to get us started. We can extrapolate this and do luxury versus import versus domestic versus startup franchise, whatever you want. But the bottom line is the trend you're going to find is the same. The trajectory is the same. Okay. And that's what you want to take from this. So where do we go from here? So if that's the economic data, that's 31% up, that's 32% up, and then of course 31 and a half. Okay, good. So over 6 years, that's pretty good. So we got that. Now, service and parts revenue for the year, 7.25 in 2019. COVID, 6.75.
Down.
We bounced back 7.5, 8,
Back up.
8.5, 9. Our run rate. June of this year, we're at 4.5 million on NADA. So I doubled it. So our run rate would be 9 million this year. So, Ted, there's one part missing. We're missing ROs, but we're still growing. So that means we're growing on the value of the RO. There's only 3 ways to grow a business, whatever business you got, right? Number of transactions, number of dollars per transaction, number of transactions per customer, right? So here we are at 9 million. So that's 20% growth. That's a 3.5 cager, right? So, all right. This is where it gets serious, Ted. Technicians. You remember, Ted, I'm in the business development space for automotive, right?
Sure.
Is Traver an economist? No, Traver's not an economist. But to me, this whole thing is an ecology. It all works together. And you want to look at this from a macro level and say, wait a minute, Ted, in 2019, we had 267,087 technicians on payroll per NADA in the United States. 3 out of the next 5 years, Ted, we would decrease from the previous year. In 2020, it went down. In 2021, it went down. And in 2023, it went down. Ted, over the time that we went from 7 million to 9 million in revenue out of service and parts in the average store, we've only increased the amount of technicians 1% over 6 years. It's not sustainable. Okay. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper. This is a problem in business development, Ted, because if you're bad on the phones, if you sound good, but you're bad, I'm going to show you today what bad looks like. But this is like breaking down film, Ted. Yes. It's not going to jump out at you with the words on the screen. You got to know what to look for. Let me just spoil this real quick. We have more competitors than 17,000. We have 160,000 competitors fighting for auto repair. 160,000.
We sure do.
There's 9 of them for every one of us.
That's right.
Remember that.
Yep. And that's the real competition. Yeah.
Ted, when we call an independent or a chain, their average time to get somebody in is 1 to 3 days. Average. And by the way, I have study after study. Now I'm going to cite some of them here yet, probably after lunch today at this rate. Just kidding. But in our stores, that's not the case. And the reason is we got to have the people.
Yeah.
And our leaders need to understand the gap here. Okay. Listen to your service department calls. Watch your game film. Seeing we're doing the football theme.
That's what it is. Yeah, sure.
Did I thank you for the football theme, by the way?
I need to thank you, I believe.
Let me start with sales real quick. If you screw up on how you sold the vehicle, I'm not telling you to screw up. Ted, you know, I was on the BDC front end space for a quarter of a century, 25 years, right? I mean, I cut my teeth there. I'm a fan. But what I'm saying to you is when they're in service, they can forget what happened 3 to 5 years ago is what I want to say. Sure. If I can just say it. Okay. I'm not saying they will. I'm saying they could. But here's the thing. Every time they come to service, you know the question they're asking? Don't want to keep dating these guys? Should I buy? They're that much closer to the next purchase. We got to get that right. And the first thing they look at is scheduling. There's a little firm called JD Powers, and they did a study this year, 2024, relevant CSI study. In the CSI study, it's chock full of data. I mean, like the first 4 points, you're like, okay, that's enough. I already know where to look. But what they say in the study is the irony of service scheduling, the actual process of scheduling an appointment ties to loyalty. It's like a proxy for loyalty. If they have to wait, if it's hard to get to somebody,
Yes.
68% of customers are calling the store. Ted, when ADP bought my last company,
Right.
Traver Technologies in 2000,
Yes.
I spent the first couple of years going to Detroit and some other places and looking at online schedulers. And I tell this story every once in a while. I thought at that time, I was like, awesome, we're finally going to solve retention, and because we got online schedulers. 2005, we had like 6% penetration. I was like, geez. 2010, we had like 9. I'm like, really?
Mm.
2015, we're at 13% per JD
Mm.
Powers.
Mm.
Okay, JD Powers this year says in the study right now, they say that the online service scheduling is 20% nationally. And
Jeez.
it's, in quote, it's been there for a long time. Now, I just recently read some LinkedIn posts, guys were talking about this, and they were stellar guys. They're guys that know their stuff. They're like, well, let me tell you how you fix that. And then they did that. So I'm not saying there's nobody out there above 20, but what I'm saying is I'm kind of impatient. 25 years is about all I got to wait on the customers to all move online. If they're still calling, I think we need to solve this. That's
Yes.
what I'm saying. Okay. So the last thing is service experience versus the purchase experience. I mean, you got to get the service experience right or else. So when you think of online versus on the phones, I kind of stole it already, but listen to your calls. You know, what I would say here is, you know, online versus on the phone, you got a ton of juice. Their study this year, you should go and look at it if you're
Okay.
not familiar with what it has. 68%, I quote, still make appointment over the phone.
Yes.
Online service schedulers hovered around 20% for a long time. So you got that. And then if you want to grow your RO count, you know, that 225 that are missing in the average store, the 100,000 a month in revenue, there's nobody listening right now that will say no to that. Everybody's leaning in going, hey, what do you got? And I do get calls on a regular basis like, are you aware? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm aware. But it's a compounded problem. It's not just one thing. It's, you know, do you have available slots in your scheduler? Some of these folks are setting too few slots available. So when the customer goes online, the first appointment they can get is 2 weeks from now. All right, and they can call the independent and get in tomorrow for real. Okay.
Right.
Yep. Independents average 1 to 3 days. I've told you that. We're more than twice that for dealerships.
At least. Yeah.
We have thousands of stores that we interact with every month here at Traver Connect, literally. And I'm telling you, that's the reality.
Yep.
Can I find you a store that I can get you in 3 days? Yeah.
Sure.
I need some time. Okay. They're special. They're special. The question, technicians, make sure that that's married up with your calls. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to summarize it. World Metrics. I used a lot of data from World Metrics. I use those guys often. I got kind of 3 buckets for us here, Ted, to recap and finish up. Obstacles. I would say there's a few. There's 160,000 facilities. So we're not competing against, you know, 16,999. We're competing against 160,000. So there's 9 of them for one of us. 70% of those guys are independently owned and operated. What does that mean? They can pivot pretty quick. So stay nimble. That's what I would say. Average availability in those places, 1 to 3 days. For us, it's twice that or more. Only 20% of customers schedule online. That's an obstacle. We built the tools. We have the integration. They still don't really use it. You better solve that with the phones. And then 80% shortage of technicians. You want a little bit of good news?
Mhm.
It's short there too at the independents, not just here. Okay. All right. So second category is conversion drivers. If I'm getting opportunities, how do I convert more? Or folks that are looking for service that maybe I didn't sell, conquest deals. How do we win? 76%, notice the word uppercase, rely. Ted, not prefer, not, you know, would like, they
Online.
rely. So my question for you is, what do your online reviews look like? Okay. Secondly, 85% trust them. 80, and this is current data. This is 24 stuff. Average customer satisfaction scores for the independents is 4.5 out of 5.
Well,
okay. 90% offer some warranty on services. Warranty could be a promise.
You bet.
But most of our stores already have this, but we don't speak to it. So to me, I think in your marketing and your messaging, I would add that. In your calls, I would add that. And then the wallet is tight today, Ted. And there are plenty of options at our service drive financing type tools that on the spot approval for
You
a
bet.
$1,000 set of tires. You follow me?
You bet.
So make sure we're solving for that. And then the last category is opportunity drivers. Where are there opportunities? This one here I love because it shows us that most of the people calling that are or coming in for service, either they feel anxious. And you go, John, why is that an opportunity?
It's great.
I'll tell you why. Because we know. When you don't know, you can't do anything about it. You're hitting and missing all the time. If that's the way they run that play and we don't know, we don't study the film, you can't do anything about it. But to know it, let me ask you something. Are there other professions that require people that have a soft hand, like a nurse or a doctor or a dentist?
Sure.
So
Sure.
if they feel anxious, we can hire and train people. Train. What does that look like? Well, when they call in and they tell you what they need and you say, sure, I can help you with that. That's one way to respond. Or you could say, I can absolutely help you with that. I can certainly help you with that. I can definitely. Words that end in ly at the beginning of that call are 3x in terms of communicating comfort, and it tells that caller, I got the right person. Are you doing this? Because that's what you want to be doing. You can solve anxiety by having proper training and proper people. Most of them, 2/3 agree, I want to spend money with you on maintenance. I'm not trying nickel and dime and just get an oil change. I agree maintenance prevents major repairs. So are we saying maintenance is cheaper than repair? Over and over and over. At Chick-fil-A, the words my pleasure, not thank you, not you're welcome, not no problem. It's my pleasure. Took them 7 years to make that stick. Make sure maintenance is cheaper than repair is sticking on the lips of our people in service. Ted, the vehicles have gray hair. They're
Yes,
12 years old. By the way,
Old as
Ted,
ever.
do I have any? You'll tell me when I have gray, right?
Yes, I'll tell you when it's coming.
Okay, good, good. Cars are older, which means they're going to spend more money and differentiate. We talked about how you can. That's an opportunity. Mobile van service, go to them, pick up and deliver. We do retention moves here. A lot of
You bet.
moving parts to make it work,
bet.
but those are the kind of things you should be thinking about. And then the bottom line, Ted, is you got to fix the phones like permanently. And so let me just hammer this home with one last point. If you've listened to the theme of football and fixed, you can see there's a need. There's a gap. We're missing ROs. We want to grow. What's the problem? I'm not telling you that's the only problem, but there's an old saying, and it happens in service and it happens in all kinds of businesses today. You got to have the right tool for the job. And Ted, I want to say this. If you don't have the right tool, any tool a person needs in their business, you're paying for, whether you have it or not, Ted.
Yeah.
So if it's a hammer and you don't buy the hammer, you understand that you're paying for all the jobs that go by that you don't get because you can't drive nails.
That's right.
If your phones aren't fixed, if we're not staffed properly with technicians, if we're not looking at the tools we're using, we're not making those investments, we're writing the check.
You bet.
Ed, always a pleasure, whether it's training, whether it's execution, whether it's tools in service business development. We'd love to come alongside you and make experience matter.
I hope our audience can see why Traver Connect is different, why they understand the industry, and why they're the best. John Traver, amazing information. And Sarah, a whole lot from there.
I always learn so much every time we get the opportunity to learn from John. So John, thank you for all you do for us in the industry. Absolutely
a pleasure. You guys know that you're as much a part of what we're doing as anyone else. So thanks for making it possible.
John, on behalf of the Fixed Ops community, I want to thank you, wish you a happy Thanksgiving to you and your family and the Traver Connect family, and greatly appreciate being able to stand alongside you for these past many events since just about the beginning when we got started, and to come along for the ride.
Yes, and it is an absolute pleasure to walk it with you. Happy Thanksgiving to both of you, your families, your organization, and I'll pass your word on to ours.
Great. Everybody, the best in the business, John Traver, Traver Connect, traverconnect.com. Easy to find online and on social media, and a big part of our industry and our big part of our industry's future. John Traver with us today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.